having the title of CTO says as much about what you do probably as what we know about Chandler Bing's work at Friends. That's because that is one of the most generic titles nowadays in startup land. A CTO can be doing a whole bunch of different things or a combination of them, and I genuinely believe it has become a catch-all title. The question of the day is, what type of CTO are you, and are you aware of that? Because if you don't know, if you haven't stopped to think about it, chances are you're not maximizing your potential, you're just going with the flow as opposed to deciding and realizing where your advantages are, where you want to go. If you have no direction, no wind is a good wind, right? So in this video, I'm going to break down the most common archetypes of CTOs and tech executives in general and help you decide what you should be doing and aiming for. Hi, I'm Ben-Yosef. If you're new here, I'm a tech executive consultant and coach, and I help people just like you maximize their potential and lead teams they're proud of leading. And today, I'm going to break down the different responsibilities and archetypes of CTOs based on what I wrote about in my book, The Tech Executive Operating System. And we're going to start with the LEAP responsibilities. LEAP starts, first of all, with the L for leadership. And this is actually the first part. What type of leader are you, if at all? I assume that if you call yourself a tech executive, if you have such a responsibility in the company, whether you're a co-founder or not, you have to be a genuine leader. You cannot be that person who just, in the side is like the founding engineer who just waits to solve all the meaty problems, but is not in the room where we're discussing the strategy for the company, what we ought to be doing. If you're just waiting to get orders, I don't care what title you are not a leader, you're not genuinely an executive. So I want you to first of all think, do you want to hold such a responsibility? And I always tell my clients, if you're genuinely an executive, if you have such a senior leadership role, remember that with great responsibility should come great power. That's the reversal of the Spider-Man law. And what we want to ensure is that you have the ability to shape how the company is going to be managing itself, the direction it's going in the future. You don't have to be the sole one deciding, very likely not, but you do have to have a way of influencing it, or you're not really a leader. Now I want you to think, what type of leader would you like to be? Are you interested in leading people and helping them, or would you be more interested in just thinking about what to do and being in those sorts of discussions? Where do you see yourself as having an advantage? Maybe you don't have an advantage there yet and you want to focus on that as part of your growth. What type of areas or situations do you feel most attracted to? You have to take a second and think about that as opposed to just going with the flow. I've seen it so often in many startups where, because they're so agile, we rarely take a second to think really about what we want to do. We just go with the flow, we just do what we feel has to be done right now. And that's good most of the times. However, this very basic, simple, greedy algorithm that just takes you to whatever is currently most urgent means that you just might be stuck in some local maxima and miss out on the fact that you are not doing everything you can, you are not evolving in your role, and maybe you're not fulfilling your destiny to have a different type of responsibility in the company, or maybe have a different type of influence. And therefore, I think it is extremely helpful, especially if you haven't done so in a while, to take a second and think, what would you like to do? Where do you feel yourself shine? Where do you feel like you can have more impact on the company? Because again, you have to have some sort of direction, and very rarely anyone else can have an answer for this that's not you. Even when I work with people as a coach, I very rarely can tell them what I think they ought to be doing. I ask them a bunch of questions to help them understand what they want to do. So you can do that with yourself. Having thought about that, now let's break it down to the 3 most common tech executive archetypes. And you probably have seen them all. Maybe you're a combination of all of them. What is important to remember here is that none of these is rigid. You don't have to be solely this or that. You don't even have to be the only one doing it. We've seen companies with several VPs of engineering, for example. But what I want you to think is that these are, in general, the types of responsibilities that tech executives have, and therefore think about which of these do you currently do, which of these do you want to move into or move out to, etc. And let's start with what so many people have in mind. That's the P in LEAP, which is for people and processes. Oftentimes, this person has a VP of engineering title or similar when it comes to having the responsibility of leading the actual organization. You're managing the people. You're in charge of getting that organization up and running, hiring people, deciding how it's going to look, which teams are we going to have, how many managers, how they're going to communicate. Are we, split into functional? We have back-end and front-end. Are we split into squads that are product-driven? Whatever it is, these are the things within your purview. You have to ensure that your people grow. You have to ensure that they deliver what has to be delivered. And in general, your personal product, which you deliver to the company, your output, is this organization and its ability to deliver what the company needs. This is very often what co-founders and the technical co-founders in startups end up doing, because even if they come from a very technical background, they were senior engineers at the beginning of the company, often you also end up having to hire the first few engineers and manage them, at least in the beginning, before having someone else take the lead of that. And therefore, when you have the people and processes responsibility, you have to ensure that you work on yourself and your ability to genuinely coach people. Management is a profession, even if it doesn't always seem like that in tech. And if you just think you can just wing it, yeah, it might be okay with the first 1, 2, 3 hires, especially if they're senior. But if you still have this responsibility for months, I think that there's no way to escape having to put real effort into this. Even if down the line, like a year from today, you don't want to still be doing this role, you will be doing your team and the company a disservice if you don't give them enough attention and help them grow, help ensure that you have at least the right amount of processes in place, think about how people are improving, think about where they're going ahead, put this basic coaching into place to ensure that these people who are so critical, especially when you're small, have enough support and can actually keep growing. Yes, you don't have to remain the VP of engineering or have that responsibility for long if you don't want it. But again, because it is so often what we have to do when companies start, and oftentimes people just have this responsibility, even if you then move to one of the other responsibilities we're going to cover, you'll still have some people reporting to you usually. I want you to think about this as part of your responsibility. You cannot just wing it. I've got a bunch of videos about coaching people, and I'll link to some of them here on the cards on the screen. And I think you really need to check those out if you feel like this is what you're doing, but you never have actively worked on doing this. You're just winging it. Now let's move on to the next archetype, and that is the very technical one, the person who has the technical chops. And this brings us to the A in the LEAP, which is architecture and innovation. Oftentimes, this is the person who might have the deep tech knowledge that is used to found the company. Maybe you have the ability to come up with the different solutions. You are the most senior engineer in the company. You really know the area. You have come up with a bunch of ideas that actually enable the business. And even if you're not the smartest person in the room, you are brilliant enough to ensure that what you're doing is relevant. You keep having experiments. You push people forward. You are always up to date with the latest technology and changes, so you know what's coming out. You know what sort of experiments the company should be doing, you know what sort of innovation we can look into, and you are essentially at the lead of the company when it comes to its pure technical abilities. Usually a CTO, maybe a chief architect, chief of innovation, I don't care what title you've got, but what's important to remember is that simply by having this responsibility, even if you don't have a team or just have a small CTO office or something like that, you still have a lot of leadership here because you have to find a way to make this innovation keep going throughout the company, find a way to ensure that the architecture that you come up with, maybe you have ideas about how to do things differently, all of these have to be done in a way that is traceable to business impact, because otherwise this is just tech for tech's sake. If you have new ideas about doing things, but it doesn't really change anything in the business, why even bother? You have to learn how to be very, very close to the business, what your clients need, and what's happening in the market, so your innovation is innovation that's relevant, not just innovation as in, oh, I read something on Medium, let's try that out, but really having ideas that can transform the business. If you think about the sort of barbell bets you want to make, you want to ensure that whatever changes you make are either going to have a very sort of secure, safe result. It's not really a bet, it's something that you know is going to work out. Or if it might not work out, if you're really doing something innovative that you're not certain about, you want to ensure that it would have enough of a win in it. So we don't do something that doesn't give us enough value, even if we do succeed, because that's just a waste of opportunity cost. If you are an architect, tech lead, whatever sort of tech executive, you have to really be aligned with what the business is doing, so you have the right ideas, you lead your team or the people working with you in that direction in close alignment with what the business needs, and you also have to learn how to make people execute on your ideas, because it's so easy sometimes to just have the POC and say, here, you see, this idea works, now we just need to turn that into something in the product, and then things just drop because you don't know how to follow along, how to follow through, and ensure that what we do is eventually ending up in the hands of users. The soft skill part of your responsibility is oftentimes the hardest. When I work with people doing this, they sometimes have this portfolio of all the bright ideas that they think they came up with, yet no one is using. And I say, who needs that? That's like hoarding ideas that will never be used. I would rather you have one solid experiment and learning how to make the team, being the champion of this in the company and ensuring that it actually ends up being delivered and shipped, as opposed to having all of your ideas in very neatly documented Notion pages, feeling so proud of yourself and what your team is delivering, in air quotes, because you're not delivering any real impact. And I've seen this happen so often. We think that our output is having those ideas, and yet we don't have any real impact on the business. This too often is what some CTO co-founders end up doing when they realize they don't want to have the people responsibility. They move to the tech side, but having let go too much of the leadership portion, not knowing how to get things done, how to get people to care about the project, showing what's in it for them, showing the business impact, they end up like in this bat cave where they come up with all sorts of really grand ideas, yet those have virtually no impact on the business, leading them to either burn out and decide they want to leave because they don't see any reason to continue doing that, or some people are just so happy with tech for tech's sake till they reach a point where everyone else in the company just looks at them and like, what's that person doing over there? Like sitting like a monk on their Notion, having those ideas, and from time to time they just step out and say, hey, did you see this? And no one cares because the company is on fire, but you're talking about something cool you just came up with. If you are this sort of tech obsessed tech executive, you have to learn how to put that into use by the company, or you're not really doing anything. Lastly, in Leap, we now get to the evangelism part. This is the external facing CTO. Oftentimes you see this as the CTO who helps in sales or the CTO who talks at conferences. If you're a company that has a tech-related product, you have APIs, you actually have a reason to speak in front of people in conferences that are technical and have someone who's technical doing that. There's a lot of value there. If you do that, oftentimes you can very easily become disengaged with what the team is actually doing, with what the product is actually developing, because you're so obsessed with what you're promising people to have, with what the customers need. I'm not saying you don't need to do that, but I am saying that maintaining your product mastery, knowing what's happening inside, and being that bridge between the external world of what customers are saying, how our integrations are looking when we go to prospects, when we have that, and being the bridge that allows people to understand what the external world is saying and seeing what troubles we have inside, and being able to say, actually I think a lot of people wouldn't mind about that. Or maybe we can promise people things a bit differently so it wouldn't be that hard to implement. This is a key role in profitable engineering. When you do that, you can have so much impact. So it's not enough to just have your talks go smoothly, have all of your slides, be very smooth with prospects. You also have to learn how to maintain your touch with the organization, the engineering organization, so that you can bring them a lot of value, help maintain their own product mastery, understand what's happening in the outside world, and also make sure that whatever you and the sales organization, for example, are promising prospects doesn't end up costing more than it's worth for the company. By the way, if you want to learn more about profitable engineering, I've got an ebook about that. It's very short and it's got a bunch of very high impact lessons for people about that. And I'll put the link in the description of the video, just because I think you ought to read that if you care about this part of building high impact engineering team. This evangelist oftentimes is someone who has been with the company since the beginning. You have a lot of understanding about what is going on. You most definitely need to have a seat around the strategy table, because you have a real connection with the clients, and oftentimes you're the most senior person who actually sees users and clients, and therefore you might have insights no one else has in the company. So leverage that to ensure that when you're weighing the different ideas for the roadmap, the different options you've got, you weigh in and you give your insights into this, because otherwise it's just wasted. Let's sum this up. We have these three typical archetypes of the tech executive, which is someone who's in charge of the people, like a VP of engineering, someone who's in charge of the tech itself, a chief architect or CTO, and the external facing CTO, the one who goes to talks and conferences, etc. But let me tell you that there's another very special kind of CTO, and if you find yourself being that, that's fine. And that's the Wildcard CTO, oftentimes a co-founder. This is something that I've seen repeatedly with many of my unicorn clients, where the CTO with time has become this sort of superpower in the company. They are no longer associated with a single part of the company, not even a tech part of the company, but a bit like a free electron, they move to where they're needed, but working at such a high impact sort of position. It's not about being the hero who saves the team when there's an outage. It's about having this executive power be used where needed. 6 months, a year and a half, sometimes rebuilding the product organization, working to rebuild how sales looks like in the company, what customer success should be, because they never really had that. And now they're spinning up that organization, getting it to a point where it's viable, and then moving on to the next thing. Sometimes for long periods, working on specific innovation to try a new thing, so that the company can pivot or try something and then move along to the next one. And I just want to say that if you're this, you're probably already doing things that are at the top of your potential, as in delivering the company the most amount of value you can, which is terrific. Maybe you need help ensuring that you do that in a healthy way and you're not just being busy spinning up all these projects that then die when you stop being there, which I've seen in the past, where we can just, when we're focusing on things, it goes well, but the second we move on, if we didn't create an organization that's really viable, if we don't have the tool set to do that, then things start sagging immediately as you drop them, and then you'll have to go back there in like a year. Learn how to do that, and you're like gold for the company. I genuinely believe that. And I just want to say that if that's what you do, that's perfectly fine. I've worked with people who felt that something was wrong with them because maybe they weren't as technical as they used to be, maybe their title was a bit confusing, and that's something that maybe you need to solve or not. But this is actually perfectly fine, because these are people who take the time to think, what do I do? How can I deliver the most amount of impact to the company, and then just go there. If doing that ends up creating sustainable value, and not just value the second you're looking at it, that's amazing. So to sum all of this up, we have the 3 regular archetypes and we have the wild card. Whatever one you are, that's probably fine, but I want you to, again, take some time to think, are you pleased being that? Do you want to shift more towards one direction or the other? Are you investing enough in yourself to ensure that what you're doing is something that you treat as your job? It's not something that you do along the way, but you're actually learning, you're actually experimenting, you're taking note, you're thinking about what you want to do in that direction to ensure that you are doing your personal best and you keep improving. Having said all of that, I hope that you are now equipped to be a better CTO, or whatever title it is that you've got. And if you are a different type of CTO, if you feel like I missed a critical archetype of tech executives, I am genuinely interested to hear. So please let me know in the comments. And thank you for watching. If you like this, please subscribe to get the next one, and I'll be here again soon.